Welcome or welcome back to Solidarity on the Bench, a podcast for 20 somethings by a 20 something. I'm your host, Katie Yu, and on this podcast, we talk about everything and anything with a focus on mental health and personal well being. New episodes every Tuesday at 11 a.m. PST. I am joined today with Niina. I am very excited for Niina to be on the podcast because Niina and I have been following each other for definitely like quite a while. I want to say years because you've been with me since I was foulist, I'm pretty sure. And I've been with you
Yeah.
for like all of your UGG drops. And so Niina, I know her kind of like as ugg.inc and then kind of rebranded to ugg.niina with two eyes. But she has kind of this brand which is self-growth, and UGG is like understanding good health. And so all different versions of health, mind, body, soul, continuous learning and self-growth and all of that. So I'm really inspired by kind of Nina's journey through life and her ability to share that. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And just to piggyback on what you said, I have loved your journey as well, just with Phallus alone, and all the quotes and all of your words for me have always been so big. So to see you move and use your actual voice and use your face and your body and your life to showcase all that you're capable in doing it's so cool to see, and I'm also really happy we became friends, so there's that.
Yes,
So
me
thanks
too.
for
Well,
having me.
thank you for coming on. That means so much to me. So I kind of gave a brief introduction, but I want to hear from your own
Yeah.
words, like who you are and kind of what you do in the online space.
Oh my gosh, I feel like that's such a confusing question because I don't think anyone knows who they really truly are, right? I think we're kind of just like going with it and seeing what sticks. And for me, I think that's very true. For a while, I didn't really know. And starting on Instagram, I kind of just, it was a big teaser for me. I was putting out things that I felt were very much my interest, things that I've always excelled in, my writing, my ability to connect with people. And so when I first started Instagram, I wanted to make sure what I put out there was very authentic to me. And I think that wellness has always been a space that scared me more than anything, intimidated me, scared me because it was very much nutrition and physical wellness based, and that's very far from how I lived my life. And so when I started up, which means, like you said, understanding good health, I wanted to make sure people knew that it came from a place where wellness means something and health means something different from for everyone. For me, it's very different from what it could be for you, and there's definitely a lot of similarities, I'm sure. Um, but I kind of just started with that and putting out a lot of mental health for me, especially because I post and I share a lot of things that I'm just dealing with. So, for the most part, the best way that I could answer your question is I am a girl who just posts on the internet, trying to connect with people and just trying to see who I really am each and every day, and in hopes that I can also help other people find themselves as well.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, your, 100 questions to get to know yourself series was a huge inspiration for me. Like, you just post so much valuable content, and I am so glad that we were able to connect. Like, that was really,
Yeah.
really incredible. And so I know we kind of talked about this before we started recording, but for context, it is end of December. Nina's just had a surgery on her foot. But one of the
Hmm.
questions that I ask all of my guests, and this is kind of perfect for you to answer, is when was the last time you asked for help?
Oh my God, I feel like I don't stop asking for which, you know what, is honestly one of the hardest things for me to do. I have a humongous amount of pride and I hate to ask for help. I really don't like asking for help. It comes with that feeling of feeling like a burden. And I don't like to feel that. I love to be self-sufficient. I love to be independent. So this process of having foot surgery and needing and physically having to have help and having to ask has kind of pushed me into a space of learning not to feel bad for taking up space and needing help. So the last time I asked for help was probably like 10 minutes ago when I had to get upstairs and my mom had to like carry my scooter up. But it's a really interesting perspective to to realize you aren't a burden, and just because you need help is never going to be a bad thing, especially when people are willing and able. And if someone makes you feel bad, maybe have a conversation and see why it is that they're trying to make you feel bad. Maybe see if you are asking for too much. Just have a conversation that always goes well, at least in my book. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I this is like I want to say maybe my eighth or ninth podcast episode, and it is
Yeah.
always so inspiring to hear, everyone who comes on and says like, I hate asking for help, but I do it anyways, because I think that is completely
Yeah.
the mentality that like I'm in as well. Like I hate kind of asking for help, taking up space, but it is always
Oh,
so inspiring to me to hear when everyone else asks for help, and it kind of normalizes that. And so that's kind of what the question aims to do. So thank you for sharing that.
of course.
Shifting kind of into wellness, we did talk about this a little bit, and you mentioned it when you're giving your intro, but I'm so curious because, wellness on Instagram means so many different things, and so I want to know specifically, what does wellness mean to you?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, going back to my youth, wellness really meant eating healthy, being super nutritious, being very careful with your body, especially I think growing up. I'm 28 now. In my early 20s and even like teenage years, everyone was so skinny. And like I'm Cuban, I have curves, I have a figure, so I always felt bad. And I also love food. So I'm like, what the hell? Like, am I not allowed to eat? And then the other part was also like the physical wellness. I don't like to work out at all, you know? So I always felt like I was doing something wrong in the health space. So for me, getting out of that really was during COVID, of mentally getting out of that box where a lot of people ordered takeout, so we didn't really care too much about like being super intense with our like food regimens, and we also weren't allowed to go to gyms and do this like crazy exercise. We were really looking to our health, like our physical internal health. And so for me during that time, I really started to realize like health for me is super mental. It's only mental, at least. And my mental health always does well when my spaces are really organized. So organization for me is a humongous form of wellness. Cleaning anything, cleanliness, having everything in its space, being with my cat, so like cuddling. I don't know if like cat therapy, I know it's an actual thing, but like purr frequencies are huge for me.
Mm-hmm.
Reading is a huge form of health for me. Taking long walks is a huge form of health. So mine almost translate very well with the category of slow living. I think for me, that has always felt so true and so authentic to who I am and who I want to be as a person. I think when I'm in that go, go, go mentality, I feel the least amount of healthy. I feel almost like beaten down. I feel super inauthentic to who I am. So that's my form of wellness. And I'm still learning, I'm still growing, and I'm still kind of just picking and choosing what makes me feel healthy, what makes me feel good.
Yeah, and I love how you kind of mentioned like the slow living piece. I feel like I'm completely the opposite. We were talking about how, I live
Uh,
in London now. I just got back from the
yeah.
gym. Like this is like, but we embody, the two different kind of sides of wellness, and it's whatever is kind of
Sure.
true to both of us. And again, always so inspired by your journey because it makes me realize that like sometimes what I would perceive as wellness is like just being on the go, like always going to the gym, always doing this isn't necessarily what is the best practice for me at the time. And so always like seeing another person's side of wellness and mental health and living slowly and authentically, like that has been so inspiring for my journey as well.
I think it's cool too that you mentioned like we're on two different sides. And I think that your version of wellness is nothing less than mine, and mine is nothing less than yours, you know? And so
Hmm.
when I see you and what you do and everything you're able to accomplish, the last thing I think of is like, I'm more healthy. Like, you know what I mean?
Right, right.
On the contrary, I see what you do and I see it as like this huge feeling of wellness because for you it's so authentic to be going around all these countries and learning culture and throwing yourselves into these like even uncomfortable moments. Like you really
Hmm.
thrive in like this growth of what's unfamiliar, and that's such a cool thing, and it's also really inspiring. It makes me wanna travel, makes me wanna try new things, so it's almost like because we're in different spaces, you can, like, rub off on each other and really grow, and that's when I say I'm still growing, I'm still learning, I'm still, like, picking and choosing what works, that's not to say that I won't do a little bit of what you do and vice versa, right? Like, I think
Hmm.
that's the cool part of this space is we can just, like, bump off of each other and kinda keep it moving, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And this idea of kind of like, there's so much in the health and wellness space that we can choose to, lean into or lean away from. I know that
mhm.
Pilates, like taking your magnesium, all of these things have kind of cropped up in the past couple of years. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, as someone who's probably really into wellness, how do you kind of choose what to try and what to subscribe to in this health and wellness space?
Okay, so I think this is, at least for me, this is a really complicated question because part of me gets very much inspired and I'm excited to try new things. I'm excited about the idea of Pilates. I'm excited about learning how to do pottery or whatever wellness is for you, for me, whoever, and taking all these supplements and all this stuff, but it's also incredibly overwhelming
Mm-hmm.
because of the amount of consumption we have on the internet. Everything is so fast-paced, especially on TikTok. And when you're swiping and learning and jotting down, like, oh shit, there's a new supplement, like whatever it's called, but like vervain root or like I don't even know the names
Mm-hmm.
anymore, but like I get so overwhelmed of what works. You're looking at like how to better your skin's health, but also like gut health, but also your hair's health, but also like your foot health or whatever it is. So it's like you need to stop a second. At least for me, this is what I have to do for myself. Otherwise, I will probably explode. I kind of just focus on one thing at a time and say, "Okay, what is it that I want to focus on in terms of, like, internal health?" Right? And I think of, like, "Okay, my sleep is terrible. I've heard magnesium is fantastic. Let's start with sleep," or so I kind of
Mm-hmm.
try to niche it down and narrow things down based on what my priorities are in my personal life, and if I find something that's interesting on TikTok, on Instagram, something that you were talking about, something that another person that I follow talks about that I aspire to be, I kind of just jot it down for a later moment. And then when I have a second and I say, like, okay, my sleep is doing okay, let's start to venture into new things, then
Mm-hmm.
I'll look at that list. Because otherwise, I feel like the industry has become so it feels like things are being pushed down your throat, and I've never been someone who enjoys to be forced in any capacity of my life, so when I feel that, I kind of just push it all away.
Mm-hmm. And
So
I
that's
love,
kind of where I am, yeah.
yeah, I love that you said that because I think when we were kind of brainstorming ideas, I was saying that
Mhm.
I did a research project for my econ thesis about like the idea of that girl. And because it was economics, it was more about like consumption and
Sure,
the money side of it. And I was
right.
basically saying like, okay, there are these products that we assume to be that girl. And capitalism and like the wellness industry is pushing on us that if we buy the correct products, if we look a certain way, then we will feel a certain way and like we will be that girl. And I think that the piece about your mental health, your mental sanity throughout all of this, like
Mhm.
imagine that lifestyle change of going from 0 to 100 and being super overwhelmed with all of these new products. And so I like how you were saying, like, okay, I take it slow, like one thing at a time. And I think I'm learning that as well is like the more you consume media in the wellness industry, like on TikTok, on Instagram, the more you learn that like there's just so much to try. And there's
Yeah,
always been a lot to try, but we've never had access to like everyone's opinions on what is good and what is working as much as we have right now. And so we
mhm.
always kind of tote that like the wellness industry is this space where like we're bettering ourselves and like we're better than everyone else because everything we're doing is so much better and this idea of better and wellness.
Yeah.
But if you're not kind of taking it slow and like actually implementing routines that are gonna stick and that are gonna work, then like what are you doing? You know, you're just gonna buy products that like sit on your shelf.
Totally. And I think that goes really well into those challenges that you used to post about sticking to habits and sticking to routine. I started to do it because you'd started to do it. And I think it was called like the 75 hard or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
it was another one too, which I don't remember the
It was
names, but
Project 50, consistency
Project 50.
project. Yeah.
Yes. So I started to do Project 50 because you did it. And for me, I noticed the consistency in my life felt really nice. It definitely felt forced because it was something you had to commit to every single day, but it was a force that felt good
Mm-hmm.
because it was not that many requirements. It was drink water, do 30 minutes of exercise, read 15 pages. I don't remember the rest, but along those lines. And I think that with that, it felt manageable. And I think that's the perfect word to go off of. Being able to manage a certain amount feels okay. And when there is so much more, like you said, the overconsumption, this pushing down your throat mentality, this the craze of it all is how I look at it. And more so than anything, I see it with like the supplements and the things to do and the things to try, not so much the physical activity, because I think that people definitely decide with their bodies like, okay, yoga's for me, okay, Pilates for me. No, I love to run. No, I love to go to the gym and like lift
Lift
weights.
weights. Yeah.
Like Jesus. Um, but for me, it's always been those videos of, okay, wake up with me and see my morning routine. And it's like a girl drinking 17 drinks before she has a meal. So it's
Hmm.
like, okay, that chlorophyll water, and then I put like some other like powder in my water
The
that's,
greens juice, the
yeah, it's
lemon
like
water.
22 based water drinks with like all these potions and like things. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I can barely have water in the morning. I like go straight to like I want eggs, I want food, I want like something to like satiate me, but like water is not my favorite thing in the entire world, which is probably not a good thing, but I try. Which I have my water bottle here that says toma más agua, which is drink more water in
I
Spanish,
love
but
that.
and it's still to the very top because I haven't had water. But the point is, I think these comparisons to girls and guys in the wellness industry who do things a certain way can intimidate you to make you feel like you're not doing enough. And
Hmm.
then you fall down that rabbit hole of the supplements, the workouts, the am I journaling enough? Am I reading enough? Am I my hair, my face, my this, my, and you get lost. So
Hmm.
I think that for me, I've had to take a step back for my mental health and say, okay, I am not this person. I will try X. I will try journaling for 30 days. If it doesn't feel right with me, I'll move on to the next thing. And that's totally cool. Maybe I'll try it and I'll pick it up in 3 months. And maybe I'll love it and maybe I won't, which is super fine too. So it's kind of just trial and errors. I think it's like the lay of the land. It's the way that we should be living instead of beating ourselves up because we're not water drinkers or whatever else, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. And kind of like going back to, choosing something maybe in like the mind, body, soul, going off of the UGG principles. I know people really love hearing like tangible tips
Yeah.
about just anything. So, do you have any other like actionable pieces of advice when it comes to implementing a new wellness practice into your life?
I think start small. I think the best tip for me is to start small and kind of just take things with a grain of salt. If it is something that you want to, let's say your goal is to read 25 books in a year, start with one, you know? Start with one, see how it feels, you know? Like, don't do this crazy thing of, I'm gonna read 150 books this year. That's great if you're a reader, you know, and if you've always loved books. But if you're trying to get back into reading or you've never really liked it and you want to start with a book and start with one that isn't intellectual because it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be. It can be the biggest rom-com in the entire world if that's what interests you. Start with something you like, and once you get used to that rom-com life, then you move on to a biography. And if you're like, whoa, I hate biographies, go into a mystery. Do things that feel good, not things that you think will be good based on what other people are doing. That's how I see things. That's what's always worked for me because I've done the opposite as well. I've gone straight to the biography that's the most boring shit I've ever read in my life. And I realized I can't get past 10 pages because it's probably not for me, or maybe that particular story of that particular person sucks. I don't know. But start slow, start easy, start simple, and then work your way up. Those are my biggest tips for starting a new habit and implementing it into your life, for sure.
Something I was kind of hearing and thinking about when you were speaking is like also the big theme of kind of what we're talking about is like adapting whatever wellness practice
Hmm.
you want to implement like to your life. Again, like what you were
Yeah,
saying about reading, you don't have to read a biography. You don't have to read 100 biographies in a year to be successful as a reader. Like you
right,
reading makes you a reader. I think that we so often think that you have to go from 0 to 100, and people see, people on the internet, and like myself included, I'll take a little bit of the blame of me being like, I'm just going to start running. And I just started running like some crazy amounts. And people are like, how are you doing this? Like, this is crazy. And I'm like, let's remember that I didn't start from 0, right? Like, I started
yeah,
from like 15 or something. Like, I already do cardio. I already have this habit of going to the
right.
gym. I'm just like kind of pivoting and implementing it. So, like, don't compare. What you're seeing in your life to like someone else's, because we all have different baselines, we all have different interests, and it's easier to implement if you care about the habit and like you adapt it to what works for your life. And so I wanted to mention that as well.
Totally. And I think that's also a good point. When you mentioned running, I also thought of running in my head because that's something that I can't stand.
Mm-hmm.
But when I see other people do it, I'm like, that's incredible. It's amazing. But I read something recently, I think it was a couple months ago, that said, you can wake up tomorrow and become a runner. It's not this, you're not born with this identity of painter, runner, actress, whatever it is, a podcaster. You're not born with that identity. You assume it later in life. You begin to become that thing with practice. And you even said you started doing podcasting a year ago, and with time your podcasts have become better and better and better, and you become more comfortable in your skin, how you speak, how you feel speaking. All of those things come with practice, and I think that's true of anything that we do. And maybe, like you said, running for you comes a lot more simpler because of all the things that you do in your life physically already, where for me, I don't do shit. So for me, it's going to start at negative 10, 100%. But that would
Mm-hmm.
also be okay if I wanted to do that? So this title of I'm not a runner because I've never really ran. Well, you are. If you start running, you're a runner. Period. That doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean you're Usain Bolt, but like you're a runner, you know what I mean? So I think that this mentality, which also comes in with like imposter syndrome, at least for me, when people say like, "Oh, you're an influencer," I always get like weirded out, and I don't know if that's the stigma of influencer. I'm always like, "Content creator, please, miss." Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you
I'm the
know,
same way.
but the reality is we are influencing people for good, for bad. Some people might see your content and be like, oh my God, these two. Like, I don't know. But other people might be like, it's incredible what they're putting out there and I actually enjoy it, or 50-50, who knows? But the reality is we are, because that is what we're doing. Whether we're incredible at it or terrible, totally based on opinion. And that's super cool too. But when you do something, you do become that title, and that's super nice to actually believe, yeah, we're influencers, yeah, we're content creators, yeah, we're writers, yeah, we're readers, whatever it is. And to actually believe it means that you become more confident in that skill and ability versus saying, like, I don't know, I don't really consider myself an influencer because you feel embarrassed. At least I do.
Mm-hmm.
But I am, and so are you. So you know what? I'm just like taking it for what it is and trying to at least go into 2024 for me a little bit more confident in my words and my abilities and the things I want to become too, you know?
I don't know if
So,
you have read, I think it's like the best-selling book this year, Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm sure you
oh,
have.
yes. Oh
You
my
know,
God, I
but
love it.
he says like start and do things and then your identity will shift after your habits. And I
Yeah,
think that's also something that's really important is like you can't think your way into success with a lot of these wellness habits. You just have to start doing it. And maybe you're
totally.
going to find that you love it. Maybe you're going to find that you hate it, regardless of what that is. And also, kind of talking about the consumption piece, you don't have to buy the things to like start a new habit. Like, we should normalize renting gear, trying something
Oh,
out for a
yes.
month before you invest like a lot of money into whatever you're trying to do. But again, kind of going back to James Clear is like just start with the actions and the cognitive behavior will follow. Like you're going to start believing that you are something after you have this like repertoire of like you're able to look back and be like this like I am a runner because I did X, Y, and Z. You're never going to change your life by changing your mindset.
Totally. And I think it does end up all being perspective. It is all mindset. It is how you want to see things. Because at the end of the day, if you're not strong-willed, and that's practice in itself to start to become strong-willed. I used to be so full of doubt, and I would rely on others' validation. Oh my God, I love your page. Oh my God, you have this amount of followers. Oh my God, like shares, whatever it is. It sucks that we fall into that, and I know it's not our fault. It's very much a societal thing, but it just suck, and it sucks that we mentally have to get away from those thoughts and say, "You know what? All of these things are valid because we've worked to get here in any capacity. Whether we had the following or not, we're posting every day, and we're trying our hardest to connect and to have these things settle well with others and impact their lives." And I think that both of us I think that's like an underlying factor in why we do the things that we do. I think, yes, 100%. It's very much, and let me know if I'm misspeaking because I'm like telling you what you're doing.
No, keep going.
But
It is all resonating.
I think it's very true that we both post because it feels good for us and it feels authentic to who we are, and what we're doing for ourselves is very therapeutic, but I think the other part of the therapy in posting is the fact that it's helping other people, is the fact that it's impacting others' lives, is the fact that we get those messages saying, "Thank you so much for sharing this. I didn't think that I thought I was alone in this. I
Hmm.
thought that I was the only one who felt this." And that for me has been pivotal in the way that I see my self value and self worth with connecting with other people and with this particular space that can feel very lonely and can be very, it feels like you're in kind of like solitary confinement sometimes when you're not in a good mental space, you know?
Hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of, I forgot the question. I forgot the what we were even talking about. But that's kind of where what I felt like, at least recently with my foot problems and stuff. I feel like like my slow living is too slow right now, you know?
Hmm.
And so I'm trying to find my footing, for lack of a better word. Trying to find my footing of like what feels right again in my posting, what feels authentic to me without it being forced, without it being just content for content's sake, you know?
Hmm. And kind of going off of that and like the slow living, I wanted to highlight a community question because I got a lot of questions kind of about
Oh, cool.
having a slow life and
Hmm.
practicing that,
Hmm.
especially in such a fast-paced world. And so someone wrote, how do you deal with feelings of disappointment when you've decided to live a slow life, but it just gets busy? And then, like, also the best tips to practicing slow living while kind of living in a major city or like living in this world that values overproduction, overconsumption, and like this go, go, go mindset.
So the first one, the disappointment, does that refer to self disappointment or disappointment that's from other people? Because I think
I
they're two very different questions.
I would say probably self-disappointment.
Yeah, that one's I think a little bit trickier. For me, I think that I fall into like a guilty conscience of feeling disappointed in myself when I'm not doing too much, when I'm not doing as much as I think I should be doing. So sometimes I feel guilty that I am in slow living versus the contrary, which I think the question referred to doing too little, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I I think it's kind of just giving yourself a pause. At least that's always worked for me, taking a moment, taking a pause and being compassionate with yourself and saying, you know, why? Why are you feeling this way? Where is it coming from? Is it really truly coming from yourself, or is it really coming from maybe someone's judgment around you? I think for the most part, my guilty conscious, my the feelings that I have of disappointment usually come from what I think other people feel of me. At
I
least
can
the
relate to
majority of
that.
the time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Versus me myself, I feel cool. I feel great when I'm like chilling and slow living and authentic and like whatever. I feel great. But I know at least with immigrant parents, or my parents came from Cuba and worked their asses off to have this life that we have now where they didn't have. And their life is very much go, go, go. We don't slow down. We don't take the time to like pay attention to our mental health. Like we pummel through it, we suffer, we keep it going. And I'm not like that at all. I need to focus on it or I'm literally gonna crash and burn. So
Mm-hmm.
for them, I think sometimes they have these disappointments or judgments of you're not doing enough, where
Mm-hmm.
you yourself might feel like I'm doing as much as I possibly can at this moment in time. My capacity is to the roof, you know, but it's almost like you have to create distance in those moments, at least like mental distance. It doesn't have to be physical. Sometimes it's necessary to have physical distance, but for me, I've had to take a step back, create mental distance, and say, their psychology is not my psychology. They feel this way because of the things that they've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
The things that I have gone through is a very different truth. It's still valid. It's just different, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And kind of just you're basically soothing yourself. You're basically like giving
Mm-hmm.
yourself your own form of therapy by telling yourself like it's okay, like you will get busy again and you will find the time to like deal with it in that way, but for the moment being, chill, take a step back, swallow it, and like keep it going. You have everything together, you're good, you know. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's hard to also do that for yourself. It's very hard.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm personally curious about the second question, which is what are your,
Yeah.
tips to practice slow living when living in a major city? And I think a lot of that too is like there are feelings of disappointment that you're assuming other people are putting on you and no one actually is really looking at you that much. And so
Mm-hmm.
especially like me kind of like going into 2024 thinking about revamping and really truly practicing and prioritizing my rest. I would love to hear your opinion on
I
like,
love that.
the best tips for slow living, especially with like other people around you doing so much and feeling that pressure to do so much.
Yeah, I think that also goes into like this resolution talk, and I've always kind of been turned off by it because I think it's almost like too much, you know? I think it's always good to have a resolution, it's always good to have goals. I don't think it's necessary to hyper fixate on them because it's January 1st, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think personally, I live in Miami. Miami is it is a big city, but it's super slow paced. Like everyone gets late everywhere. No, it's not in New York. It's not in LA. I don't even
Mm-hmm.
know how to explain it, but everyone is slow as shit. So for me, I've always been used to a little bit more slow living in general because it's been like socially acceptable. At the same time, I think go, go, go energy is very good. It's very admirable, it's inspiring, it's exciting, but it's also one of those things where I think if you're willing and able to sit down, pull out a piece of paper and start to just jot down what it is you really want, whether that is in the new year or 2 months after the new year or starting right now on December 28th, you write down what it is that you want to prioritize and you start. Start
Mm-hmm.
with one thing. Take it slow. Like you said, you wanted to prioritize rest. What does that mean for you? Maybe saying no more. Maybe saying no to things that you are not inclined to wanting to do. So if someone's like, "Oh, like let's go climb a mountain," and you're like, "I don't really feel like climbing a mountain today." So you say no. And then you
Mm-hmm.
say like, "Hey, what about next week if you are actually interested in climbing that mountain, you know?" So I don't even know if you like climbing mountains, but that's just the example
I
that
love climbing mountains, but it is a very good example. It's like,
you know,
even though I love doing something, I can't always be at my peak performance like all the time. And like, I need rest to be able to climb that mountain. I mean, this is more
100%.
figurative than literal.
Right,
And I
right.
mean, it tracks literally as well.
It could. I mean, for you, it could. For me, I couldn't. But I think it's true of like the figurative mountain, right? We're all climbing it in a very different way. We're all reaching for some different kind of goal. If yours is rest, mine is more productivity, believe it or not. Even though, like, yes, I'm productive, but I also am very comfortable with being unproductive because for me, that's productive.
Hmm.
So I almost feel like I'm doing too little half of the time. So in the new year, I want to be able to do more and not feel overwhelmed because there's so much on my plate. And I think that for me, what's how I've been able to deal with that is kind of ripping out that piece of paper and jotting down, okay, what does being productive look like? How can I manage these 5 things at once? Okay. And then you break them down instead of like the big picture of everything, because I think when you look at something in such a grand scheme in a grand way, it's so overwhelming
Hmm.
versus nitpicking and deciding, okay, rest can mean saying no. It means turning off all your lights at 10 p.m. It means Monday through Friday no nighttime plans or only on Wednesdays, like, I don't know, just like an example of just like setting these like rules for yourself, like these limitations that feel like limitations in the moment, but almost feel like commandments for your
Hmm.
life. They feel like they're for good versus like a requirement feels so heavy and so negative. But it's a positive requirement in order to get to that goal. And then once you've gotten that goal of like, okay, now I know how to do rest. Now I know how to implement it. So when my life is hustle and bustle and crazy, I'm not going to be worried that my rest is going to take a toll because I know, yeah, it will a little bit, but I can manage it now that I have this long list of commandments that I can set into place when I'm ready.
Yeah, and the topic of like commandments, guidelines, rules, whatever you want to call them,
Hmm.
reminds me a
Hmm.
lot of how I was able to make so many changes like with Project 50 is like
Yeah.
you choose rules for yourself. You give yourself a set amount of days to do it and you stick to it no matter what. Like I don't care if it's the holidays, I don't care if there are special occasions, like you stick to that. And because you kind of are so strict and regimented for a long period of time, I think it's like 60 days to build a true habit.
Hmm.
Once you have what works for you, then you can kind of play with it and be more flexible with it. And kind of, yeah, that's going into what you said, but I definitely like I think Project 50, and that's why I always encourage people to try something like that because it
Yeah.
also like as an econ major, one of the big things that I was interested in is like gamification and like how we
Mm.
can use games to motivate us and incentivize us to, actually complete health and wellness tasks. And so for me, Project 50 was like this one big game. It was like, I'm a
Yeah.
video game
Same.
character. This is like the things I need to do. And I was like,
Yeah.
I wanted to do them every single day because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna level up. Like I'm gonna get to level 49,
Yeah.
level 50. And it's figurative, but it translates in a very
Yeah.
literal sense of like however you can make these habits stick is is what kind of works for you. And again, going back to this piece of like make it accessible to you. Like your
Mm.
journey is not going to look like anyone else's journey. So I really wanted to highlight that and I really appreciate you for mentioning that as well.
No,
Um,
100%. I love that. I love the idea of being a character in a game. I think that's so cool. And I like that you use that in such a real way because I think people see Project 50 just scrolling and they're like, holy shit, that's so intimidating. I
mhm,
could never. And like, I'm one of those people. And I said, like, you know what? Like, screw it. I'm doing it anyway. And I loved it. I thought it was super fun. I kind of took it as a game too. Not so much as like a video game because whatever, in the moment I didn't think of it, but like I genuinely probably did in the moment, you know?
mhm.
I just didn't really think about it until you just brought it up. But I love that idea of making things accessible to people by just breaking it down and making it more real, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of on the topic of accessibility, something else I
Mm-hmm.
kind of wanted to highlight, we talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but this kind of like monetary incentive to consume. And
Mm,
someone kind of wrote, in terms of the wellness space, how do you grapple with the idea of health and wellness? And we've talked a lot about this, right? It's like health and wellness is not just about the physical things you do, what you look like, etc. But so much of kind of what we're shown in like the that girl aesthetic, the clean girl aesthetic is upper class. And it's advertised to be
yeah.
accessible to everyone when in reality it's not. And so how do you kind of grapple with that, understand that, and then kind of apply wellness habits to your own life?
Oh, that's a really, really tricky question because I think that in the beginning of my wellness journey, starting on Instagram specifically, I was over consuming. I mean, like buying whatever I could possibly buy to be, like you said, that girl. I thought, oh, the best lip product, the best hair product, the best like supplement, the clothing, whatever it is. Even, and I even get into it still because I think it's just part of just social media and this day and age of you see these cool shoes, you're like, shit, they're super trendy. I want them. I
Mm-hmm.
think that this, I do this with physical consumption more than anything. I tend to make a list on my phone called things I want, like general wants, and this is just on the notes app. And I will, let's say if I see like the Adidas Gazelle Samba, whatever, the one that's trendy, I
Mm-hmm.
will literally write it down. I'll type it out and I will pretend I never saw it again and wait and wait and wait. And for the most part, I wait until either like my birthday or the end of the year or whatever it is, or maybe 6 months later. And I really look at it and see like, do I still want that thing? And if I don't, I delete it off of the list. And if I want it, I either buy it for myself or I ask someone to get it for me for my birthday or Christmas. But I think that's the way that I've been able to deal with consumption because I used to just go online and shop my little heart out. And I think it was almost like a joke in my house. I kid you not, Katie. It was like Nina always has a box. Like the
Mm-hmm.
guy, the UPS man comes for Nina, Nina alone. And it was like at first it was funny, but my job was literally returning things because I keep nothing. I would just buy because I was bored. And then I would
Mm-hmm.
go to the store, like the either USPS or UPS or wherever to return it, and then it was cyclical. I was
Mm-hmm.
so bored that all I was doing was buying, returning, seeing things that were trendy, buying it, returning, and it was like it was literally it felt like an illness. And now I don't really buy much. I don't really return much unless I really want that thing. But the way that I've been able to deal with consumption in a healthy way is having that list and keeping myself in check. Like, do I really want this thing because I want it? Or is it because this really cool girl that I follow wears these sneakers and is like super hot? Like, you know? And I think there's a big difference of being aware. I think the awareness of it all really makes a difference. And the only reason I've become aware is because I noticed my pattern wasn't healthy. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very true of looking at yourself like internally and saying like, do I feel good doing all this shopping? Do I feel good consuming all of this? Is it really authentic to me to buy this, and that? It's really just internal dialogue and questioning yourself, and it feels weird. It feels kind of like you're talking to like I don't know, like a villain or something, being like, why are you doing this, like if you're a cop. But like you almost need to do that to yourself in order to say, like, "Listen, lady, like, you're doing too much of something that you probably shouldn't be doing." And, like, is it
Mm-hmm.
making you happy? Probably not. It was making me literally miserable to think that just because I had these shoes, I was this person. No, it was never enough. I needed the jacket too, and I needed the belt, and I needed the Dyson or, like, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
and, like, it sucks because yes, did I buy the Uggs and do I love them? Yes. 100%. But I also realized, like, I actually do like them, you know what I mean? It wasn't
Right.
just to buy them, and I know I'm being very specific to, like, such a large issue, but I think that it's important to, like, make it as relatable as possible and make it known, like, it is also a very basic issue. It's a very basic question to ask yourself, like, "Is this for me? Is this making me feel good? Is this adding to my life, or is it taking away?" And
Mm-hmm.
that's what worked for me, and still, I'm working on it every day, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I have so much that I want to add, but first and foremost is like, talking about the Adidas Sambas and you're like, and I need to buy the
Yeah.
jacket and I need to buy the shirt. It's like we're given this mentality like if you look like that person, if you just buy the right things, and we were saying
Mm,
this in the beginning, is like you're going to be them. And that's so not true. Like
no,
just because
not
you
at all.
dress exactly the same as someone else, it doesn't automatically give you their lifestyle. It just gives you credit card debt. So slow
I
down a
love
little
that.
bit. And then also just kind of this is what I'm studying is like behavioral science. And
Mhm.
your thing about the list is like just peak behavioral science, right? Like it's instant gratification, and delayed gratification. And studies have shown like I can't give you a scientist or a researcher, but I know that
Yeah,
there is research on
that's
the
super
fact that like
cool. I believe it.
yeah, you get a lot of dopamine from like okay, wait. What am I trying to say? So basically, studies show that delayed gratification gives you more dopamine than instant gratification. So you
Mm,
have the anticipatory dopamine where you're like, I'm really excited about, receiving this one thing. You have the dopamine of actually getting it, and then you have like the post effects. And so delaying kind of like that anticipatory dopamine like as long as possible.
I
And
love
there
that.
is that peak kind of I want to say, people say like 2 weeks before you buy a product. Some people it could be a month. So you have to see what it is for
Yeah,
you. But I
yeah.
found that it really works well in my life too. And like I have implemented this. This is such like a very niche specific thing. But my dad and I, for example, we love bubble tea. And whenever like when we
Oh,
were here in the summer, like we were just like every day, like let's just go get some bubble tea. Let's go get some bubble tea. And he was like, this is just way too much sugar. Like they're First of all, we don't need to be spending like $6 per drink every single day. That's kind of ridiculous. Second of all, it's a lot of sugar. Third of all, that's a lot of tea. Like we don't want to be consuming like this. And so
yeah.
using my behavioral science knowledge and nerding out on this, I was like, okay, we're
Yeah.
gonna like, set a day, like 2 or 3 days in the future where we're like, we want bubble tea now. But we're gonna say that we're gonna get it, 3 days later after we go to the gym, and we're gonna be thinking about it for like 72 hours. And then the moment comes, we get it, and it's always good, but it's never as good as you think it is because like anticipation is where you get all that dopamine. So
Right.
hyping this up in our mind, being like, we're so excited to get it. Then we get it. We're like, oh, that was great. And then we drink it and we're like, okay, cool. Like, I'm so glad I waited. Let's wait another week, and that really
Yeah,
worked for us. We
yeah.
literally cut down our bubble tea consumption from 6 times a week to 1 time a week just by using behavioral science. So I wanted to
I
throw that
love
out there as well.
that.
Like, there is a lot of science behind why like things like a list works. And so, if you can't afford it now, don't buy it. Like, buying something is not
Oh
going
my
to make
God.
you into a different person. And again, what we're saying is like you don't have to buy into the hobbies. Like it's okay to try. It's okay to change your mind. Like you don't need I was watching a TikTok which was like no spend January, and she was like you don't need
Oh
new
my God.
clothes. Like your closet is overstuffed. Again, like you don't need new wellness products. You just need to
No.
try one thing that works for you, and only try the one thing. And I like what you said is like choosing kind of what you want to focus on maybe for a month, of being like, today I want to focus on sleep, so like I'm gonna buy into the magnesium, and then I get to go to TikTok and look at what the girlies are taking in terms of what
Right.
the best magnesium is. But other than that, you don't need 10 different products shipped to your door every single day.
The thing is too, how are you gonna know which one's actually working? You know what I mean? And, like, that's
Exactly.
also a huge problem, like, skincare wise, you change your entire regimen. What do you know is actually working? Unless you do the same thing and you switch out one thing and you notice, like, okay, I see more glow, I see less scar, I see whatever it is, you know what I mean? And like, you're never gonna know if you start to do 20 million things at once, what's actually making you feel good. And so
Mm-hmm.
then it could be the magnesium, it could be the Pilates, it could be the bubble tea with your dad. Like it could literally be anything, and you're still gonna be like, I don't know which one it is because my brain is everywhere. And I
Mm-hmm.
think then when you focus on too many things at once, it's like, and you said so many incredible things that I'm like, my brain is literally like, ah, right now. Like, what do I do? Like, where do I go? But I
Mm-hmm.
think what you said was really cool about the dopamine, and I 100% think that that's accurate. I'm no scientist whatsoever, but like I could see where it like checks out, you know? But I think also along with the scientific part, I think in just like the human nature aspect, the more you have of something, the less special it becomes. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And so like number one, bubble tea. Yeah, I'm sure at some point you had to be like whatever. Like we have it so much that it's like not even special anymore, you know? And then the
Mm-hmm.
other part is like same becomes true of like getting a package every day. It becomes less exciting every single
Exactly.
day to receive a package versus like having these presents that you get on Christmas or your birthday. You're like, okay, well, I can get whatever. There was a joke on TikTok I saw like I don't need anything for Christmas because I get myself shit all year round whenever I feel like it. And like
Mm-hmm.
it's funny, but it's also freaking crazy because it's true. Some people are just like, I can't wait. Like, thank God I'm not like that at all because I'm a cheapskate and I'm like, I don't want to spend the money. And if I know someone else will, like, I will wait. And like, that's also a good thing. Like, you shouldn't just buy things in the moment just because you're like desperate to have that thing. And like, if you do really want it, you will want it in a month, I promise. And you will want it
Mm-hmm.
in 3 months. One example I could give you, and this is such a weird example, but I get married in March and I was doing my registry. And in the registry, I live at home. My boyfriend, fiance, whatever you want to call him, lives at home also. And we have nothing. We don't own plates, we don't own shit. And so I told him like, okay, listen, there's gonna be one thing on the registries that's kind of weird. And he's like, okay. And I was like, don't judge me and I'm not taking it off. And he was like, what is it? And I was like, I want a mini trampoline. And he was like, why? He was like, what is wrong with you? Who do you think is gonna buy that? And I was like, Carlos, listen to what I'm gonna tell you. One, it's really good for your health. And two, I have a trauma that my mom threw away my trampoline when I got home one day from school. And I literally need it in my life again. And I also
Mm-hmm.
know that there's so many health benefits. So if I don't get the trampoline, I'm gonna die. And he was like, okay, whatever. But like, I could have easily just bought myself the trampoline tomorrow. Do you know what
Right.
I'm saying?
Right.
Pretend I don't have foot issues, right? Like, foot issues aside, I could have bought it in the last 3 years if I wanted to. But I told myself, like, it will be so much more like delicious to like receive
Mm-hmm.
it later. And it's true, like that anticipatory feeling of like, I'm gonna get a trampoline soon, like, oh, is so cool instead of just being like, yeah, I bought it and it's just there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it has to be true because just the feeling alone of talking about it, I'm so excited and it's a stupid ass trampoline. You know
No,
what
I
I'm
can
saying?
hear it in your voice, like I can see it
Yeah.
in your
I'm
face. You're
like,
so excited.
and that's the thing too, though, like if you make things so readily available, which they are anyway, whether we like it or not,
Mm-hmm.
everything becomes so mundane. Everything loses its spark. The specialty of anything becomes so bland. And that's why I think too, overconsumption makes everyone so bland, so boring, so same. And I don't want to be the same as anyone else. I'm weird as shit and I'm like super happy about it. And you are too, and you should be happy too that like we don't need like yes, if you wear a belt that I like and I think about it in 3 months, I'm gonna get the belt. Like I have
Right.
to because I'm gonna be
Right.
like, I need the belt 3 months later. But does that mean I'm Katie? No, that just means like I have a sick ass belt just like Katie has. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But like, and that's the cool part. Now we relate on our belt, but we can also relate on 3 million other things. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
it's it's this feeling of just like overconsumption can also mean that you're losing authenticity, and that's the part about it that I really don't like. I like the accessibility when it's convenient. When we need a pair of scissors tomorrow because we're doing some project and we don't have a pair of scissors at home and we need a gift tomorrow because someone's birthday and we forgot, blah, blah, blah. That's great. Convenience rocks. But when it's
Mm-hmm.
just because you're bored and because you need like that dopamine hit in that moment, like, no, bro, go outside and like breathe some air and like put your toes between the grass. Like, I promise you, you'll forget that you want to buy that belt. I promise. So,
Mm-hmm.
just like learning that there are other options and more healthy options that we can like get into is super cool to like actually see that. So I don't know, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for kind of like having this conversation about slow living. I think that you brought on a perspective that I have never really considered before, and it was like really cool for me to be able to listen to that. And I hope that the people listening also enjoy that as well. So I really appreciate you. You're like taking the time and the space and the emotional capacity to be on this podcast today.
Oh my God, no. It has been a pleasure talking to you any moment that I can, but just specifically talking about this conversation is it's really important to me, but it's also really exciting to hear your perspective too and how you feel about the idea of living authentically, slow living, and just like being cool with like who you are and like who you want to be. Is It's a really exciting topic, I think, for any of us. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much, and I hope to do this again soon.
Yes. Well, I want to give you kind of like 30 seconds to
Oh my
promote
God.
social media. I know this is
Oh
like the end of
God.
a YouTube video. So, whatever you want to do, like any cool thing you're doing, maybe in the new year that you want to promote, all of your links will be down below if you want to go check out Niina after the podcast. But the time is yours, the floor is yours.
Oh God. Okay, I have no idea what to say right now, but I promise you it'll be a good time. If if you decide to land on my page and stick around, I am very cool in the way that I love to talk to people. I love to connect. Like the minute anyone needs anything, messaging or just back and forth about stupid shit, like I'm always down. In terms of anything coming up, I don't have anything crazy except for a sweater drop, which I'm excited to announce. I haven't officially announced it, so this is the sneaky peeky. But it will be coming early January, I believe, or late January. And so look out for it, but it will be a comfy, cozy sweater. And that's about it for me.
I love it. So your TikTok, your shop, your Instagram, and the UGG sweater, like in the UGG like brand Instagram will be down below if you want to go check everything out.
Amazing.
And Niina, thank you again so much for coming on and hanging out.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Solidarity on the Bench with KDU. If you enjoyed this podcast or want to submit a question for future guests, you can follow the podcast Instagram at SolidarityPod or follow the host at katie.eu. See you next Tuesday.